I'd never seen humans like this. Testimony of an alien veteran. In 4 wars, I have seen ships die. I have watched cruisers fold in half like paper under pressure. I have seen frigates burn in colors that do not exist in nature. Colors that only happen when metal and fuel and the cold mathematics of a structural failure combine into something briefly, terribly beautiful. I have watched entire fleets vanish from scanner screens in the space between one breath and the next. In 4 wars, I have never been surprised by a ship. Until that morning. It dropped from faster-than-light travel at 6:12 station time, and the first thing I noticed was the sound. Not the sound it made. Ships in space make no sound, which is one of the few mercies the universe offers. I mean the sound my instruments made trying to describe it. The resonance signature came back wrong. Not damaged wrong. Not malfunctioning wrong. Wrong in the way a word sounds wrong, when you repeat it too many times and it stops meaning anything. I ran the scan again. Same result. The vessel was approximately 340 meters long, which put it in the mid-range cruiser class by Orkai standards. But no Orkai ship ever built looked like this. Our ships are equations. Every angle serves a purpose. Every surface is a calculated answer to the question of how to move through space efficiently and survive the attempt. Our ships look like geometry. This ship looked like it had opinions. The hull was patched in at least 3 distinct metals. I could see this from the scanner return alone. Different densities, different reflective signatures, layered over each other in a pattern that made no structural sense, and yet, by some argument, the ship was clearly winning with the laws of physics, held together anyway. The patches were old. The oldest section of hull read as approximately 340 years of age. There were patches on top of patches, repairs over repairs. The ship wore its history the way old soldiers wear their scars. Not hidden, not displayed, just there, just part of what they are now. The asymmetry was what truly unsettled me. Orkai ships are symmetrical by design and by instinct. Symmetry is balance. Balance is survival. Every engineer in my species understands this at a level below thought. The way you understand that cooling darkness is cold, without having to test it each time. But this ship had a secondary propulsion array mounted on its port side with no counterpart on the starboard. It had what appeared to be a weapons platform bolted to its dorsal surface, at an angle that served no tactical geometry I could identify. It had, and I want to be precise here, what appeared to be an external storage container, welded to its underbelly. Not integrated. Welded, as a second thought. I stared at that container for a long time. My commander, Sova Thin, asked me what I was looking at. I told her I was not yet certain. The vessel broadcast no designation on approach. This was irregular. All vessels passing through the neutral corridor were required by the Interstellar Compact to broadcast a designation, a species identifier, and an intended heading. This was the minimum. This was the law. The vessel approached in silence for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, and I logged each of those seconds because something in my training told me to keep a record of this, even though I could not yet say why. Then the communication channel opened. The voice that came through was female, I would later learn. At the time, my translator simply registered it as biological, carbon-based unidentified species, and began cycling through its 4,000 language database. The voice said something that took my translator 6 full seconds to process, which had never happened to me before in any of my 4 wars. The translator finished its work. It presented me with the result. The result was, "Anyone got coffee out here?" I sat with that for a moment. My translator offered 17 supplementary definitions for the word coffee. They ranged from a liquid stimulant derived from a specific planet-grown seed, to a cultural ritual involving the preparation of said liquid, to a colloquial expression of general wakefulness and readiness. None of them explained why this was the first thing a vessel operator said upon entering a neutral zone that 3 major interstellar powers were currently staring at very carefully. I opened the return channel. Orkai do not fill silence. We let it sit. Silence is information. Silence tells the other party that you are present, that you are considering, that you are not yet ready to speak, and that this is not an apology. I let the silence do its work for approximately 8 seconds, which in an Orkai conversation is a respectful pause between thoughts. The voice filled it in 3. "Hello? Anyone monitoring? This is the Karoo's Luck out of the Kandari Reach. We just ran about 4 hours over our transit estimate because Danny decided the long way around was a great idea, and it was not, for the record, a great idea. And we are all very tired. And someone mentioned this station might have a resupply dock. Over. There was a sound in the background. A second voice, male, complaining about something. The first voice told him, in a tone that suggested this conversation had been happening for a long time, and showed no signs of ending, that he could file his complaints with the hull patch he was supposed to have finished 3 days ago. The male voice said something about the hull patch being fine. The female voice said the hull patch was not fine. The hull patch was a philosophical statement about the impermanence of metal, and she needed coffee. I was still processing this when my scanner returned the vessel's registration data. The ship, the Cruise Luck, was 340 years old. The human aboard who was arguing about hull patches was 31. I read the numbers twice. Then I checked my scanner's calibration. The calibration was correct. Then I pulled the human species average lifespan from the database. Somewhere between 80 and 120 standard years, with significant variation based on medical access. The ship was older than my third war. The human inside it had opinions about coffee. I opened the channel again. I gave them docking clearance. Sova Thin came to stand beside me at the monitoring console. She looked at the scanner return for a long moment. She looked at the registration data. She looked at the hull patches. She said, "What is that?" I told her it was a human vessel. She said, "Is it supposed to look like that?" I told her I was not certain what human vessels were supposed to look like. I was fairly certain this one looked like what happened when a vessel refused to accept that it was supposed to stop working and simply kept going out of stubbornness. Sova Thin is a veteran of 6 wars. She has the stillness of someone who has seen most things and been surprised by very few of them. She watched the Cruise Luck maneuver into the docking approach, listing very slightly to the port side, in a way that had nothing to do with any gravitational pull I could identify, and she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "The approach vector is wrong." I told her the approach vector was not wrong, exactly. It was achieving the correct result by unconventional means. She thought about that. "Log it," she said. I had already begun. The Cruise Luck settled into the docking cradle, with a sound that my station's sensors registered as a heavy metallic contact, followed by what I can only describe as a groan of relief. A ship groaning in relief was not something I had a log category for. I made one. The docking seal confirmed. Atmospheric equalization began. I watched the readout as the inner door cycled, waiting to see what came through. The human who came through was Captain Nora Carew. She was shorter than I expected. I am not certain what I expected. The ship had given me an impression of something vast and stubborn and improbable, and she matched that, but in a compact form. She wore a jacket that had been repaired nearly as many times as her ship, and carried a battered metal cup that she was already drinking from before the airlock had fully finished cycling. She looked up at me. She had eyes the color of old engine oil, and they were alert in a way that suggested she had been awake for longer than was sensible, and had made peace with this. She said, "You're Orkai." I told her I was. She said, "Good. I was worried you'd be Vrecken. Vreckens never have coffee." I told her that we did not, in fact, have coffee. She looked at her cup. She looked back at me. "That," she said, "is the second bad news I've gotten today." Behind her, through the still cycling airlock, I could hear the second voice, the one who had argued about hull patches, saying something that sounded like a question. She answered it without turning around, something short, something that made the voice go quiet. I asked her for her manifest and transit documentation. She produced them immediately, which surprised me. The documents were complete, accurate, and stamped correctly by 3 different waystation authorities. The Cruise Luck was registered as an independent trade and transport vessel. The manifest listed their cargo as medical supplies, equipment components, and what appeared to be a significant quantity of something called instant noodle packets. I logged all of it. I told her the docking fee and resupply procedures. She nodded, already turning to look at the station with the focused attention of someone calculating what needed to be done in what order. Then she stopped. She turned back to me. "You've never seen a human ship before," she said. It was not a question. I told her this was correct. She nodded slowly. She looked at something in the middle distance for a moment, and there was something in her face that I did not have a word for yet. My species reads emotion through posture and stillness. Humans, I was beginning to understand, wore their interior states on their exterior surfaces in ways that took some decoding. "We look pretty rough from the outside," she said. I know. I told her the vessel appeared structurally coherent. She made a sound. A short, compressed sound through her nose. I would learn that this was laughter of a specific kind, the kind that carries something heavy inside it. Structurally coherent, she said. I'm going to put that on the hull. She walked into the station. I stood at my console. I pulled up the scanner record of the Caru's Luck one more time and looked at the hull patches, at the asymmetric propulsion array, at the storage container welded to the underbelly like an afterthought that had become load-bearing. 340 years old, still flying. I did not know what to do with this information. It did not fit the categories I had built over 4 wars. In my experience, old things that had been through enough battles eventually stopped. They were retired or destroyed, or they simply became too damaged to continue. The Caru's Luck had been through enough battles. I could see that clearly. The damage records embedded in its registration history were extensive. It had been in 7 documented engagements. It had sustained critical damage in 3 of them. It had not stopped. I thought about the hull patches layered over hull patches. I thought about repairs made in 3 different metals across 3 different centuries. I thought about 340 years of refusing to quit, accumulating history in layers, wearing every fix and every break and every return to service as part of the same continuing argument with the universe. Sova Thin had gone back to her station. I stayed at the monitoring console. I looked at the scanner return for a long time. In my 4 wars, I had never needed a category for this. I began building one. In my 4 wars, I had watched many kinds of fighters. The Orkai fight through discipline. We train our instincts out of us and replace them with doctrine. In a battle, an Orkai soldier is a function. You give the function inputs. The function returns the correct output. There is no noise. There is no deviation. There is a plan, and the plan is followed, and where the plan is not possible, the nearest correct approximation of the plan is executed instead. We win wars the way water carves stone, steadily, without drama. The stone always breaks eventually. The Keth fight through hierarchy. Every order flows from above. Every unit holds its position until the order changes. They are precise and terrible and predictable. Which is the thing that beats them eventually? You learn the hierarchy, you break one node, and the whole structure seizes. The Vrecken fight through aggression. Rage is their primary tactical asset. They hit hard and they hit first, and they hit again before the first blow has finished landing. They burn out quickly, strategically, but in the short term they are devastating. I had files on all of these. I did not have a file on humans. I built one over the 18 days following the Caru's Luck's docking, during which Captain Nora Carew and her crew conducted repairs that I was not certain were structurally sound, and which I later confirmed were, by a margin I still do not fully understand. I watched humans work. They argued constantly while working. They also worked faster while arguing. These 2 facts did not reconcile within any framework I had, so I logged them separately and moved on. Her engineer was named Owen Dale. He was 26, which in human years meant he was very young. He had an approach to machinery that I can only describe as personal. He spoke to the Caru's Luck systems while he worked on them. Not technical language, personal language. The kind of language you use when addressing something you have a relationship with. I asked Captain Carew about this. She said, "Owen thinks the ship has feelings." I asked if this was a common human belief. She drank her coffee. Some of us believe it more than others. I asked what she believed. She looked out the observation port at the Caru's Luck sitting in the dock, patched and asymmetric, and 340 years old. "I believe," she said, "that when something's kept you alive long enough, you owe it the courtesy of not being rude to it." I logged this. 18 days after the Caru's Luck arrived, the Vrecken Raider group hit the corridor. They came in fast, which was Vrecken. They came from 2 vectors simultaneously, which was smarter than average Vrecken, and suggested they had a commander worth taking seriously. There were 9 vessels total, 6 fighters and 3 mid-range cruisers, enough to control the corridor, enough to make whoever was in it reconsider their plans. There were 4 Orkai patrol vessels in the corridor at the time of contact. I was coordinating from the station. There were also 3 human ships. They had arrived the previous week as part of a growing coalition presence, a gesture of alliance between the human independent fleet and the Orkai patrol network. Their designations were the Caru's Luck, a vessel called the Ardent, and a vessel called the Harriet's Law. I had met the captains of all 3. They were different people, with different voices and different ways of standing, but they had one thing in common that I had not yet found a word for. The engagement began at 0914. The Orkai patrol vessels moved to their assigned positions. The doctrine was established. The vectors were calculated. The plan was sound. I coordinated from the station and watched the scanner return as the engagement began, and the pieces moved where they were supposed to move. Then the humans moved. The Ardent, which was a mid-sized vessel with moderate armament, went directly for the largest Vrekin cruiser, not the nearest, not the most tactically vulnerable, the largest. It came in at a vector that I calculated, in the 3 seconds I had before contact, served no rational strategic purpose. It rammed the Vrekin cruiser. On purpose. At speed. The Ardent's hull was reinforced. I could see that from the impact data. Reinforced specifically for this, which meant it had been planned, which meant someone had thought about this before the engagement began, and had decided that ramming a cruiser 3 times their size was a tactic worth preparing for. The Vrekin cruiser lost its forward weapons array. The Ardent was still moving. Captain Carews' voice came over the channel, not to me, to her own crew. "That's the way," she said. Just that. And somehow it sounded like sunlight. Then the Vrekin cruiser's comms channel opened. They were broadcasting in the open, which the Vrekins sometimes did when they were angry enough to stop thinking. And the sounds that came from their ship were the sounds of things going very wrong very quickly. I watched the scanner return. I watched the Ardent continue engaging. I watched the Orkai patrol vessels follow the doctrine, clean and correct and doing exactly what they were trained to do. And then I watched something that made me stop the recording and stare at it for several seconds before I confirmed that I was seeing it correctly. One of the human crew from the Harriet's Law had gone outside, in a suit. In the middle of the engagement, the Harriet's Law had taken fire to its starboard weapons platform. A direct hit. The platform was compromised, its targeting system gone. I had already calculated this as a weapons loss event and adjusted the tactical picture accordingly. That platform was done. That was the logical conclusion. The human outside was fixing it, not retreating to make repairs in a safe interval, not logging the damage for a post-engagement repair, fixing it. Right now, with fire coming in from 2 Vrekin fighters, with the battle happening around her as if the battle were the background of this activity, and not the central event. She had a tool in her hand. She was working. I opened the channel to Sova Thin. "One of the humans has gone outside," I said. Sova Thin's voice was perfectly level. "Is it dead?" I watched the scanner. The human raised the tool briefly. A gesture. At no one. At nothing. "It is waving," I said. There was a pause on the channel. "Waving," Sova Thin repeated. "Waving," I confirmed. The platform came back online 7 minutes later. The human returned to the ship. The Harriet's Law resumed full weapons capacity and immediately fired on a Vrekin fighter that had been repositioning to take advantage of the perceived weakness in the starboard array. The Vrekin fighter had not accounted for the weakness disappearing. The engagement continued. The humans did not fight through discipline. They did not fight through hierarchy or through aggression. They fought through something I was struggling to name. They improvised in real time, in ways that should not have worked and kept working anyway. They communicated constantly during the fight. Voices, short bursts, words that were half tactical information and half something else. When the Ardent's secondary engine stuttered, someone on the channel said, "Come on, come on, come on," as if the engine were a person who needed encouragement. And then the engine came back, and someone else said, "There she is," as if the engine had done something heroic. When an Orkai engine stutters, we log a malfunction and adjust our tactical assessment. We do not tell the engine we believe in it. The engagement ended at 10:43. 93 minutes. The Vrekin Raider group was gone. 3 destroyed, 2 critically damaged and retreating, 4 scattered and gone from scanner range. No Orkai vessels lost. No human vessels destroyed. Damage across all vessels, significant in places, but nothing that had taken the final step from damage to gone. I ran the damage assessment. I had a form for this. It had served me through 4 wars and thousands of engagement outcomes, and I had never once needed to add a new field to it. I needed a new field. The Ardent was, by every damage metric I had, non-operational. Hull integrity at 34%. 2 of 3 engine systems offline. Weapons array down to 1 functional turret. Life support functioning but stressed. The Ardent was broadcasting music. I confirmed this 3 times. Not a distress signal. Music. I ran it through the database and it returned a genre classification. Rock. Subtype designated classic. The specific recording was from a human artist who had been dead for 170 years. The Ardent's crew was playing music from a dead artist through their external comms array because their ship had survived an engagement that should, by any reasonable calculation, have killed it. I stared at the scanner return for a long time. Owen Dale's voice came through on the crew channel. He was talking to someone about the drive housing. He sounded pleased, not relieved, not exhausted. Pleased. The way you sound when something you were fairly sure about turns out to be correct. Captain Carews' voice came through next. Nora to station. Got a request for hull repair priority. We need a bay. I assigned them Bay 4. She said, "You're a good man, Vetharak." I opened my mouth to tell her that I was Orkai, not a man, and that the concept of good man did not translate directly, and that I had simply followed resource allocation protocol. I did not say any of this. I did not know why I didn't say it. I logged the repair request and the bay assignment, and I sat at my console, and I looked at the scanner return, at the Ardent listing starboard, playing a 170-year-old song into the empty corridor, at the Harriet's Law, already calculating its next heading, at the Carews' Luck, sitting slightly improbable in the middle of all of it, the most patched and oldest and most unreasonable vessel in the engagement, also the one that had taken the least damage. I thought about the human who had gone outside. I thought about the wave. In my 4 wars, I had filed 1,400 damage assessments. I had never once needed a category for operational, celebrating, should not be possible. I made one. I sat with it for a while. Then I filed the report, closed the engagement log, and went to find out if the station had anything that a human species database would classify as coffee. It did not. I looked up the recipe. I ordered the components. I did not examine this decision too carefully. The dinner was not my idea. Captain Carew suggested it on the 3rd day of the Ardent's repairs, in the tone of someone who was suggesting something they expected to be refused, and planned to ask again until it wasn't refused. I had encountered this quality in her before. It was, I was beginning to understand, a general human trait. They proposed things, and if the thing was declined, they proposed it again, from a slightly different angle, and they kept doing this, until either the thing happened, or one of them ran out of energy, which took longer than you would expect. She said, "You should eat with us." I told her that Orkai ate on a schedule. She said, "Great, we'll work around your schedule." I told her that Orkai typically ate alone, or with unit mates. She said, "We're temporary unit mates, that counts." I told her I was not certain the food would be compatible with Orkai biology. She said, "I'll make 3 things, and if none of them work, I'll eat all 3, and you can watch and tell me about your wars." There was no angle from which this could be declined that she had not already accounted for. I understood this about 12 seconds before I agreed to come. The meal was in the Carews' Luck's small common room, which was exactly what you would expect a room to look like if it had been used continuously for 340 years, and the people using it had opinions about where things went, and those opinions did not match. There were 3 tables, one standard, one bolted to the wall at an angle that served no dining purpose I could identify, and one that was clearly something other than a table being used as a table. Every surface had been used. Every surface showed it. It felt, improbably, comfortable. Captain Carew was already there when I arrived. Owen Dale was there, sitting sideways in a chair the way young humans apparently sat when they were fully relaxed. The 3rd crew member was a man named Callum Price, who was 44, and said almost nothing across the entire meal, and who I nonetheless felt I understood very well by the end of it. He had a stillness about him, an Orkai kind of stillness. He watched everything with eyes that had filed away more than they let through, and once, when Carew said something that landed funny, he smiled before she finished saying it, which meant he had already known where the sentence was going. He noticed me noticing this. He lifted his cup slightly in my direction. I did not fully understand the gesture, but something in me answered it anyway. Carew had made 3 things, as promised. The first was something that smelled strongly and was bright orange. The second was something pale and structured that I could not categorize. The third was something dark and simple that, according to her, you can't really mess up. I tried the orange thing first. The smell was strong enough that it preceded the flavor by a significant margin. I want to be precise about what happened. The flavor arrived, and it was several things at once, and those things were arguing, not in an unpleasant way, in the way of a conversation where everyone is very certain, and no one is wrong, and somehow the result is more interesting than any single voice would have been alone. My translator had described curry as a preparation in which several strong flavors are combined until no single flavor survives. The Orcai have a word for that kind of compromise. We use it in diplomatic contexts mostly. It means something like the peace that requires everyone to give up something they wanted and receive something they did not expect. The word is not usually a compliment. I thought about it differently after the curry. Karu watched me eat the way someone watches a structural test. Not anxious, just attentive, noting data. Good, she said. I told her it was notable. Notable, she said. And something shifted in her expression. Something warm, that she didn't entirely show. Owen, he said, notable. Owen Dale said, from his sideways chair. That's polite for good. I told them that in Orcai, notable was simply precise. Owen said, sure it is. Callum Price smiled into his cup. The meal moved the way human conversations moved, which was sideways. You started somewhere and ended somewhere else, and the connection between the 2 points was not always clear until later, when you had time to trace it. Karu asked me about Orcai ships, how they were designed, how long they took to build. I explained the geometric principles. She listened with the particular attention she gave to technical information, still, focused, asking questions that were further along than the answer she had just received. Owen asked me about weapons systems. This I had expected. I did not expect Karu to ask me about my first war. She asked it simply, between bites, in the same tone she had used to ask about hull geometry. What was your first engagement? The first one that felt real. I told her it had been a border conflict, 3 decades ago. A Keth incursion into the 4th Territorial Ring. It was brief by war standards, and decisive. The Orcai held their positions. The Keth withdrew. She nodded. Were you scared? I had answered this question before. The answer was practiced. I knew the shape of it. Orcai do not experience fear as humans understand it. We experience a kind of heightened information processing state that some species interpret as fear, but which functions differently, which lacks the paralysis component, which is more accurately described as, yeah, okay, she said, gentle, not interrupting so much as stepping in. But were you scared? I stopped. She was not asking about species biology. She was looking at me across a table of orange food and mismatched cups, and she was asking about me, the specific one, the 200-year-old Orcai veteran sitting in a room that had been used for 340 years, eating something that argued with itself. I had never been asked that before. Not by my commanders, not by my unit mates across 4 wars, not by anyone who had stood beside me while things burned and fell and ended. I did not answer. She did not press. She took another bite and said something to Owen about the drive housing, and the moment passed entirely, moved on as if it had never happened, except that it had happened, and I sat with it quietly, while the meal continued around me, and something in my chest did a thing I did not have a word for. Later, when the plates were cleared and Owen had started something he called the argument about the jump drive, with Callum Price in the corner, this appeared to be an ongoing project of significant duration. Karu refilled her cup and came to sit across from me again. She said, you don't have to be polite about the curry. You can tell me what you actually thought. I told her I had actually thought it was notable. She looked at me. I told her I had also thought it was warm, in a way that surprised me, and that the surprise was the interesting part. She nodded slowly. First time I had it, she said, I was 8, on a station far from anything. Someone's grandmother made it. I didn't like it. She looked at the cup. Now I think about it when I'm far from home, which is most of the time. I did not ask what home was. The Orcai relationship to home is territorial and pragmatic. A home is a base, a coordinate, a place where resources are stored and rest is taken. It did not sound like that was what she meant. I thought about the photographs Owen had on the wall above his bunk. I had seen them when walking through. Faces, people not here, people connected to him by some invisible thread that he apparently needed to be reminded of by keeping their images within eyeline. I thought about the food that tasted like being 8 years old, on a station far from anything. I did not ask, but I thought about it for a long time after I left, walking back to my monitoring station through the corridor of the dock, with the Karoo's luck sitting behind me, like something that had learned to stay upright through sheer persistence. No one had ever asked me if I was scared, not once. Across 4 wars and 200 years, a human had asked it between bites of orange food, in a room full of mismatched furniture, like it was ordinary. Like I was. I reached my console. I sat down. I opened a new log file. I did not know yet what I was going to put in it. I titled it, simply, Ongoing. The photographs. I have thought about this more than I have thought about almost anything else in this entire account, and I have been trying, throughout the writing of it, to describe correctly what I mean when I say that the photographs were the thing that changed something in me, not the battle, which I will also describe. The photographs came first. In my mind, they are still first. Callum Price had a photograph in his breast pocket. I knew this because on the 4th day of the Ardent's repairs, I had walked through the common room when he was doing something at the far table, and he was holding the photograph, and he was looking at it, and he put it away when he heard me, not with embarrassment, but with the quiet of someone returning something to its proper place. Owen Dale had 6 photographs on the wall above his bunk. I had counted them during a routine inspection walk. 6 faces. 3 appeared to be family by the pattern of resemblance. 1 appeared to be a friend. 1 appeared to be a dog, which I understood to be a domesticated animal humans kept in companionable relationships. 1 I could not categorize. Captain Karoo kept her photographs in a sealed case under her bunk. I did not see them. I knew they were there because she told me once, incidentally, while discussing storage capacity, that the only things she'd kept from the original Karoo, who had first captained the Lucky, were a navigation log I can't read anymore, and some photographs I look at when I need to. She did not say what she needed when she needed to look at them. The hegemony came on a morning when the sky outside the station's observation panels was doing the thing I liked best. The slow color change in the nearby nebula that took 3 hours to complete and looked different every time, depending on the angle of local starlight. I had been watching it for 20 minutes before the long-range scanners changed their tone. They did not come in with Vrecken aggression or Keth hierarchy. They came in the way a wall of water comes in when the pressure behind it has been building long enough to make the wall very tall and very certain. 17 vessels, hegemony class, which meant heavy, armored, and patient. The hegemony did not make mistakes that cost them battles. They gathered information, they calculated, and then they applied force in the precise amount and direction necessary to win. They had won through this method for 600 years, and they were good at it, in the way that anything practiced for 600 years becomes good. The corridor had 9 vessels to answer them, including our coalition, including the humans. I coordinated from the station. My voice was steady. I had done this before. I gave the assessments clearly, and I moved the Orkai units into the positions the doctrine called for, and I calculated the probabilities with the precision my training had built over 200 years. The probabilities were not favorable. Not catastrophically unfavorable, not certain defeat, but the kind of unfavorable that a veteran recognizes from long experience, the shape of a situation where something has to break the math to make the outcome change. The hegemony advanced. The coalition held. For 22 minutes, the engagement moved the way engagements move, when both sides are doing what they are trained to do. Clean lines of force, responses and counter-responses. The kind of battle that will be analyzed in doctrine documents afterward, because it illustrates principles correctly. Then the humans stopped doing what they were trained to do. I do not know whose idea it was first. The communication logs show it originating on the Ardent and spreading to the Karoo's Luck and the Harriet's Law in the space of 40 seconds. 40 seconds to agree on something that no tactical doctrine I had ever studied had a name for. They went at the flank. Not the near flank, the far flank. The position of the hegemony's heaviest cruiser, which was also the most heavily defended position on their line, which was also the position that, if broken, would require the hegemony commander to recalculate their entire engagement model from the beginning. It was a high-cost move, very high. I saw the calculation before they reached it. I knew what it would cost them to attempt it. I almost opened the channel to say so. I did not, because I was beginning to understand something. The humans already knew what it would cost. The pilot of the Ardent, whose name was Fiona Marsh, had been in the engagement for 22 minutes and had been adjusting her flight path in subtle ways for the last 12 of them. Not adjusting away from fire, adjusting toward a specific trajectory that would only make sense if you had already decided to do the thing she was now doing. She had been planning this since minute 10, while it was happening around her. The 3 human ships hit the flank simultaneously. The hegemony cruiser took fire from 3 vectors it was not oriented to defend, and took it for 90 seconds before it began to turn, and the turn broke the line geometry, and the line geometry was the thing the hegemony commander's calculation was built on. The hegemony paused. That pause was 7 seconds long. I have never, in 4 wars, seen a hegemony engagement pause. In those 7 seconds, Fiona Marsh's voice came over the coalition channel. She said, "Push." 1 word. We pushed. The engagement lasted 40 more minutes. I will not enumerate the full details here because the tactical record is available through the archive and the numbers are precise where I am not. What I will describe is this. At the 31-minute mark of the second phase, the Ardent's life support system took a direct hit. The system did not fail completely. It was compromised, running at reduced capacity, maintaining breathable atmosphere but registering stress across multiple backup systems. The tactical assessment I made in that moment was that the Ardent should withdraw to a safe distance and manage the system while other vessels covered the gap. Fiona Marsh did not withdraw. She stayed on the channel. Her voice was the same as it had been at minute 1, clear, directing fire, adjusting Ardent's heading in real time to keep the hegemony cruiser from reforming its line. She stayed for 40 minutes past the hit. She gave targeting data for the last 18 of those minutes to vessels she could no longer see clearly on her own scanners, because her scanner array had taken secondary damage at the 30-minute mark. She gave the data from the Harriet's Law's scanner feed, which Captain Carew was relaying to her directly. 2 ships, 1 set of eyes. At minute 40, the hegemony commander made the calculation that the engagement was no longer recoverable and signaled retreat. The corridor was ours. I sat at the console. The scanner return showed the aftermath, the damaged vessels, the retreating hegemony ships, the debris field that always follows the math of a hard-won thing. I sat for a while. Then I began the damage assessment. When I reached the Ardent, I stopped. I looked at the numbers. I looked at them again. Fiona Marsh's voice had been the same at the end as at the beginning. I had been listening for the difference, for the thing that would signal what I knew must be happening to the atmosphere on her vessel, to the physical strain of maintaining a battle station while systems failed around her. I had been listening for the voice to change. It had not changed. I opened the coalition channel. Station to Ardent, please confirm crew status. There was a pause. It was Captain Carew who answered, not Fiona Marsh. She said simply, "Ardent crew is accounted for." I understood what that meant. I did not want to understand what it meant. I sat very still at my console, and I looked at the scanner return, and I thought about 40 minutes. 40 minutes of a voice that was the same at the end as the beginning. 40 minutes of someone deciding, apparently at minute 10 when she was already planning the flank, that this was worth what it might cost. The photograph. I kept thinking about the photograph. Not a specific one I had seen. The idea of the photograph, the face in the pocket, the faces on the wall, the sealed case under the bunk, the reasons. That was the word Owen Dale had not used when he showed me his, but it was the word I had reached for in my log, and it was the right word. The photograph was not a memory. It was a reason. I thought about what someone carries into a battle they are already calculating the cost of. Something in me that had been very organized for 200 years went very quiet. The humans were grieving on the open channel. I could hear them. Not composed, not controlled, not contained to a private frequency. Loud and together and immediate. Someone was crying. The sound was raw and open in a way that nothing in my experience had prepared me to receive. Another voice came in and said something I could not translate fully. Something that meant approximately, "I am here, I am here, I am right here." No one told anyone to be still. No one waited for an appropriate interval. I closed my damage assessment file. I walked out of the monitoring station into the corridor. I sat down on the floor of the corridor outside the medical bay, where the station's medical staff were receiving information from the Ardent. I did not know why I sat there. There was no function I could perform there. My station was behind me. The engagement was over. The filing could wait. I sat on the floor. 40 minutes. The same voice at the end as the beginning. Captain Carew found me there an hour later. She had come in on the first docking shuttle from the Lucky. She was still in her engagement gear. There was a mark on her jaw that I did not ask about. She looked at me on the floor. She did not ask what I was doing there. She sat down next to me, her back against the corridor wall, and she did not say anything. She stayed for an hour. She did not fill the silence. An Orcai sits with their own grief in their own stillness. This is the correct way, the dignified way, the way my species has managed the weight of loss across 200,000 years of history. I let a human sit next to me in a corridor outside a medical bay, and I did not ask her to leave, and she did not leave. By the cooling dark, in my 4 wars, I had been wrong about something, about the most important thing. For all of them. What follows is the formal portion of this testimony. I am aware that the Assembly has been waiting for the formal portion since I began this account, which was longer and less structured than the format calls for. I am aware that the original request was for a tactical profile, assessments of combat capability, interoperability, resource cost, alliance reliability, and potential vulnerability points that an opposing force could exploit. I will provide all of this. I want to say first that I understand what the Assembly is trying to do. The High Conflict Assembly of the Orcai has maintained the integrity of our territorial space for 80,000 years through precise, evidence-based decision-making. You do not make alliance decisions on the basis of meals or corridor conversations. You make them on the basis of data, strategic calculation, and long-term modeling of risk and benefit. This is correct. This is how we have survived. I am not arguing against it. I am going to give you the data. Human combat vessels display tactical improvisation rates that exceed any species documentation in the archive by a factor of between 3 and 7, depending on the engagement type. They are most effective in situations where the expected pattern breaks, where a scenario requires a decision that cannot have been pre-planned, where the speed and quality of in-the-moment judgment determines the outcome. This is precisely the type of situation that defeats Keth hierarchy and eventually defeats even Vrekan aggression. In the 3 engagements I observed, and the additional 11 I have reviewed through available records, human units demonstrated consistent willingness to accept high personal cost to achieve coalition objectives. I want to be careful how I phrase this, because the precise meaning matters. I am not saying they are reckless. I am saying they make a calculation, and then they commit to the result of that calculation at a level that other species, including my own, do not consistently match. They maintain communication throughout engagements. This communication includes tactical information, status updates, and what I can only describe as social content, expressions of encouragement, dark humor, brief personal exchanges. This appeared, at first observation, to be a potential liability. It is not a liability. It functions as a real-time morale and coordination system that does not require a command hierarchy to operate. Any human crew member can contribute to it. This makes it very difficult to disrupt by targeting command nodes, because the system does not depend on command nodes. Their equipment maintenance philosophy produces vessels that are, objectively, more durable than their design specifications would suggest. The Carew's luck has no rational engineering explanation. The records show it should have been retired 200 years ago. It is flying. It is flying with confidence. The maintenance culture that produces this result is not something that can be easily reverse-engineered, but the results of that culture are significant and should be factored into any assessment of human fleet endurance. They do not require victory conditions that look like victory. They will hold a position at high cost if the position matters to the coalition. They will take damage to protect Allied vessels. This was observed multiple times and is consistent with broader documentation from other sources. These are the tactical assessments. The Assembly will want the vulnerability assessment. Here is the vulnerability assessment. They love things. Specific things. Singular things. They name their ships, and those names are not designations. They are relationships. They carry photographs into engagements. Physical representations of the people and places the engagement is ultimately about. They argue about hull patches and drive housings and who made the coffee wrong this morning, and this arguing is not a distraction. It is the thing that makes them a unit, instead of a collection of individuals with aligned objectives. They grieve loudly, and together, and immediately, without waiting for an appropriate interval. All of this is technically a vulnerability, an enemy who understood the structure of human attachment, who could identify what a specific human crew or unit or fleet valued most specifically and personally, could potentially use that as leverage, could potentially use it as a tool of disruption. I want to be direct with the Assembly about this. I am providing this assessment because you asked for it, and because providing incomplete information would be a failure of my function as an analyst. I am also providing this assessment with a recommendation that the Assembly consider very carefully what it would mean to pursue such an approach, because I have stood next to humans when they fight for something they love, and I have seen what that looks like, and I have watched a pilot maintain the same voice for 40 minutes past the point where the voice should have changed, and my strong professional opinion, formed across 4 wars and 200 years of experience, is this: do not threaten something a human loves. The tactical documentation on what follows is in the secondary archive, and the reading is unpleasant. The Assembly will also want to know, are they reliable? I have thought about this question carefully, because it is the right question, and it deserves a precise answer. They are not reliable in the sense that they will always follow the expected pattern. They will not. They will look at the expected pattern and decide, sometimes at minute 10 of a 20-minute preparation window, to do something completely different. They will not always tell you what they are doing. They will do it, and then explain afterward, or not explain, depending on whether there is time. They are reliable in the sense that matters. They will not leave you. I did not have evidence for this claim when I first began this account. I have it now. I have it from 3 separate engagements, and from 47 additional documented accounts I have reviewed since beginning this testimony. I have it from a conversation in a corridor outside a medical bay that I did not record because I was not at my station when it happened. When the situation becomes the kind of situation where you find out which allies leave and which allies stay, humans stay. Not because they have calculated that staying is optimal, because they have decided that you matter. And once a human decides something matters to them, the calculation is over. The cost of the position becomes the price they are willing to pay, not a reason to reconsider the position. I told the Assembly that I would address the question of whether I personally found them frightening. The answer is no. I found them frightening briefly, at the beginning, in the way that anything you do not have a category for produces something adjacent to fear in the processing centers. But fear requires uncertainty, and I am no longer uncertain about humans. What I found them was something else. I want to tell the Assembly what word I reached for, because I think it matters that you understand what this word costs me to use. I am an Orkai veteran of 4 wars. I do not use language loosely. In my species, every word in the formal record is weighed before it is placed there, and the word that is placed there is the one that is precisely correct, not the one that is approximately correct. I thought about the correct word for a long time. I thought about a 340-year-old ship that refused to stop flying. I thought about an engineer who talked to an engine like it had feelings, and the engine kept working. I thought about curry that argued with itself and tasted like belonging somewhere. I thought about the question, "Were you scared?" asked across a table in a tone that meant, "I want to know about you, the specific you." I thought about a voice that was the same at the end as the beginning. I thought about photographs in breast pockets, carried into engagements that might end badly. I thought about a human sitting on a corridor floor next to me and not saying anything and not leaving. I reached for the Orkai formal vocabulary. I searched it thoroughly. The Orkai language has 340,000 documented words and compounds, and I know most of them. I did not find what I was looking for. I used the human word, remarkable. They are remarkable. This concludes my testimony. I have served in 4 wars. I would serve in a 5th. If they ask me,